final NBC News Marist polls of tomorrow's statewide races in Florida. Andrew Gillum, the Democratic mayor of Tallahassee, is at 50%, 4 points ahead of Republican Ron DeSantis at 46%, but still within the margin of error.
So let me stop right there. This is well, okay, I won't stop right
and
there.
And in the state Senate
really
race,
snazzy.
incumbent Senator Bill Nelson leads Republican Governor Rick Scott 50% to 46%. Another race just inside the polls' margin of error.
All right, so Steve, here's another thing I've noticed. And as we get to the end of the campaign, you notice something interesting. Nelson's numbers are going up. Scott's numbers are going up. Gillum's numbers are going up. DeSantis' numbers are going up. The undecideds are moving towards their candidates. Now, if I'd been around going into my fourth election, and I had 9, 10, 11% of the people undecided about me after, doing 3 terms and running for my fourth race, I would tell everybody around me, if they're undecided about me now, they ain't going to vote for me. They know who I am. And I'm just wondering, as we see these breakings, isn't it more likely that you're going to have more people breaking for the challenger than the incumbent, especially if that incumbent's been around for 10 years and they're still undecided?
I think the wild card, though, is it's the Trump midterm. And I mean, I think if you look at like Bill Nelson, somebody who's been there going for his 4th term right now, it's sort of a reputation for being not the most overwhelming political force. Maybe got lucky in a couple of those elections. Remember, he got to run against Catherine Harris one year.
Should Jesus grant us all such grace?
But you've got a situation where it is the midterm election, and you're the opposition party, and that's been a formula that has saved a lot of incumbents in the past who've been in that situation. I think that the two most notable things I should say in those polls you just showed to me are, number one, Gillum continues to lead.
Yeah.
Every poll I've seen of this matchup has had him ahead.
Has been ahead from
the beginning. Yep. Every poll, and I think he's dragging Nelson along.
I think
I think Nelson is in his draft, and it's really helping Nelson a lot. You saw that rally the other day. You had Obama and Gillum essentially bringing Nelson along with them.
Let's just say when Bill Nelson
picture.
goes to an AME church, they're not standing up in the pews for Bill Nelson. Nothing against Bill Nelson.
No.
But I mean, he did draw a great gubernatorial candidate for what he needs for his weak spot, Bill Nelson. I think you're right. I think Gillum may drag him over the finish line.
What happened to Rick Scott? Didn't he get a bump from his the hurricane?
Didn't get, yeah. I mean, see, and they polled the question of how did the governor handle the hurricane. It was 61 to 21 support. He had Democrats coming out there praising him, and the thought among Republicans, the hope among Republicans was, you remember Chris Christie in New Jersey with Superstorm Sandy, that you would see a mini version of that. I don't see it in those numbers, no.
All right, want to get Heidi in here. The president visited Florida yesterday, where he leveled this criticism of Democrat Andrew Gillum, who is vying to be the state's first black governor.
I will say this, Andrew Gillum is not equipped to be your governor. Just not equipped. It's not for him. It's not for him. He knows it. He won't say it, but he knows it. We got to keep this state great. You're going to make it even greater if you do, Ron, and otherwise, I'm telling you, it's going to be problems like you've never imagined.
Okay, it's a similar line of attack that he used last week against Stacey Abrams, who was also looking to be Georgia's first black governor. And yesterday, Abrams responded.
Oprah's good, but the woman that she's supporting is not qualified to be the governor of Georgia by any stretch of the imagination. And I think Brian's going to be a great governor of Georgia. I think he'll be a fantastic governor. He's totally qualified. She is not qualified to be the governor of Georgia. She's not qualified.
He said you just simply weren't qualified to be governor. He didn't say why. How did you take that assessment?
I find his assessments to be vapid and shallow. I am the most qualified candidate. I am a business owner. I'm a tax attorney who was trained at Yale Law School. I am a civic leader who helped register more than 200,000 Georgians. I am a very accomplished political leader who worked across the aisle to improve access to education, to transportation, and I blocked the single largest tax increase in Georgia history. There is no one more qualified standing for this office in Georgia.
And how funny that a guy that inherited $200 million from his daddy blew it all, went bankrupt,
bankrupt
right?
in a big way.
Several times. And now can't
Bragged
even
about
build
it.
a building. He just puts his name on buildings because he can't get a loan in New York City because he's such a bad business person. He's a reality TV host, and that even faded at the end. I mean, how funny that he's doing that. But I immediately
He's not
went back
qualified.
to 1987 when I heard those words, "not equipped." It sounded like something that Al Campanis said on Nightline when he said that certain that black players were very good, but they lacked certain
the essentials.
essentials. I don't believe it's prejudice. I truly believe that he may not have some of the necessities to be, let's say, a field manager or perhaps a general manager. Campanis was fired for saying that 30 years ago. The President of the United States said that this weekend.
Well, there are a lot of races to cover. We've covered a lot of races, but in a sense, we haven't paid enough attention to the internals of what's going on in that Georgia governor's race. I mean, Brian Kemp, the Secretary of State, a horrific conflict of interest. He is in charge of the election. He's been in charge of trying to suppress the vote in Georgia for several years.
A court called him out. Federal court called him out for trying to suppress the vote.
And with no proof at all over the weekend, he charges the Democrats' campaign for governor with trying to alter the vote, with trying to bag the election. No proof at all. 2 days before the election.
But just back to the point you were making, Joe. This is vile, putrid, frank racism.
Thank you.
It's just that's what it is.
It's not.
That's what it is.
Just what
it's
it is.
not
Not a dog
even
whistle.
pretending. It's not dog whistle. It's it's a klaxon. It's a siren. It couldn't be clearer.
Gene, I like that word klaxon. Can I use that?
You can have it. I haven't trademarked it.
Strong word.
The one thing I'd say in Georgia is, and I think this may be revealed on Tuesday night. We'll see in the returns. But the counties, Fulton County itself, Atlanta, and the counties immediately around it, in the last generation or so, the populations have been exploding. They've been diversifying. You look at like Gwinnett County, for instance. Hillary Clinton in 2016 became the first Democratic presidential candidate ever to carry it. Exploding Latino, Asian, non-white population in these places. I'm wondering if the effect of the focus of this campaign on Kemp's actions as Secretary of State, if it could end up having a reverse effect where it plays right into the Democratic hands in terms of firing up those voters, getting them interested in driving up numbers like we've never seen for Democrats in that part of Georgia. And if that happens, those two congressional seats there, Woodall and Handel, they come into play.
It certainly could. And by the way, Handel in the upshot poll down 2 or 3 points, and that has been trending away from her. Heidi, Kemp, just shameless, absolutely shameless. Now claiming that the Democrats have tried to hack the election computers, and he's putting that conspiracy theory on the front page of the state website for voting.
Well, this is a test for the media, too, Joe, because there's absolutely no evidence. They provided no evidence, and they said that, in fact, there's no sign that anything was actually hacked. And, of course, this comes as the issue of voter suppression and voting rights is a hot-button issue there with the Democrats trying to get those absentee ballots counted. But I did want to also point out, to your point about racism and race and how race is factoring into this, it is as the race issue became really prominent that the polls tightened, because it was only a couple of weeks ago that DeSantis had the lead, and then he made that fateful comment about monkey it up. Then we had the racist robocalls coming into the state. Then President Trump called him a thief. All of these dog whistles, and what did we see? We saw the polls tightening.
Right.
And so while some of these ads that are really culturally sensitive and culturally insightful may be playing well in some of those rural states like Montana, where the president has a big base, what we're seeing in Florida and Georgia is that it's making the polls tighten. And to Steve's point, in Georgia, we've seen 155 increase in voter registration over 2014. The pollsters I talked to say that this is why this is going to be so hard to call up until the very end, because our voting models are all based on past voting behavior. And here you're seeing historic turnout. What did we see in 2017? This is the only comparison we really have was the gubernatorial race here in Virginia. When we saw that type of turnout, we saw a new Democratic governor elected, and we saw a historic number of Democrats elected at the state legislative level.
And, you know, that's what's so interesting, again, not talking about the economy, but talking about imaginary walls and imaginary caravans, is that Donald Trump already had those voters locked down. If you like Donald Trump because he was racially insensitive and he said these outrageous things, you already had those people. It's the swing voters in the suburbs that might have been persuaded if this entire campaign had been about, hey, you know what? My taxes have been cut. Yeah. Regulations are being cut. The economy is still growing well. We're still in the middle of the Obama recovery. Not as big as the Obama recovery, but it's still. Donald Trump has not completely destroyed the Obama recovery. And they would think that, and they'd get a lot more votes. But Donald Trump has reminded them of Charlottesville every day over the last couple of weeks. And what does that do? That inspires Democrats, independents, moderate Republicans, suburban Republicans to vote Democratic.
Well, it may, but I also just say we confronted him about the birtherism. We said it's bad, it's wrong, and he said in a low voice, I know it's bad, but it works. Racism, in his mind, works.
Well,
that's
you know
what he told us.
We'll see if it works.
Still ahead on
tomorrow.
Morning Joe.
I'm not so sure it will. And we got a ton of polls.
We talked about
like
Florida,
Christmas
but there's
Eve.
also Georgia,
Holy
Tennessee, Missouri, Arizona. We'll run through the latest closing poll numbers from key battleground states on this final day of the midterm
And we'll ask
campaign.
Steve Kornacki. We'll try to provoke him, get him into a rage, have him throwing things.
No, he's got a long couple days ahead of him. But
thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.